from Inwood, New York City. Welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. I'm your host, Aaron Sims. This is where we meet the musicians, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes make their home what we affectionately call upstate Manhattan. Today, we welcome composer, director, performer, and recording artist, Mikel Rouse. Hailed as a composer many believe to be the best of his generation by the New York Times, Mikel works has included 40 records, 7 films, and a trilogy of media operas. Failing Kansas, Dennis Cleveland, and The End of Cinematics. He has received commissions from Berklee Academy of Music, the Mary Flagler Carey Charitable Trust, and the Meet the Composer Reader's Digest Commissioning Program. Rouse's compositions have been performed at Lincoln Center, the New York State Theater, and Alice Tully Hall, and throughout the United States and Europe. We're going to talk to him about his work and so much more, but let me welcome you, Mikel.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Pleasure to be here.
You betcha. So, I understand you're a listener of the podcast as well.
That's right.
Thanks for being here in this meta moment.
Absolutely.
So appreciate you listening. Speaking of listening, when I was first, I always do my homework hopefully a little bit before each interview, and I was listening to and watching excerpts from body of your work, which is appropriate given the circumstances of your memoir, and I was reminded of the quote, "We need new forms." Which is what young playwright Konstantin Treplev advocates at the beginning of Anton Chekhov's 1865 play The Seagull. I thought of this because you have winningly accepted Konstantin's challenge and plea through a storied career in the arts with great success, I feel. Not only through your many fascinating recording compositions, but also the many mediums you've used and explored to manifest the expression of your musical ideas and opera, film, visual and sensory art installations, digital recording, and of course live performance. So I'm left all at once quite impressed and inspired, and also a bit bummed that I've missed a lot of it because you can't be there to see it all. So how do you feel about where your career has brought you?
Well, it's an interesting place to be on the other side. You don't know that you're going to get there, and then you get there, and all of a sudden you have to kind of look at your body of work. And as I know, there's a memoir coming out in May called "The World Got Away," and I never really wanted to write a book, but the fun thing about writing it was that I was kind of forced to go back and look at this stuff. And when you're an artist, you're just moving forward. You're just doing the next thing. And so it was I've told a lot of people this, but it was like all artists, I complain, I whine, everybody does that. But when I finished the book, I had this feeling like you really had a wonderful life, George Bailey.
Wow.
And so it was a good feeling because, I'm not sugarcoating how difficult it can be, especially trying to do large scale works, just the budgetary stuff, the coordination, as you know, from theater and stuff. So the book kind of helped encapsulate that. Yeah, there's been an arc to the whole thing.
Well, and a journey too. We're both Midwesterners as well, who came to New York and other places to do our work. So I'm curious, what led you to music?
My folks probably thought I was going to. Well, I've done film and visual art, and I've had visual art shows too. But they all thought that's where I was going to go because I was drawing at a very early age. But once I got the music bug, I guess that's just all I wanted to do. And I was very lucky. When I went to school, I studied both painting and filmmaking at the Kansas City Art Institute. But across the street at the time was the Conservatory of Music. So I felt like I got just a really great, well-rounded education in terms of the Art Institute was pretty free and creative, but you could easily walk out of there and never learn anything.
Yeah.
But the conservatory wasn't that creative. It was kind of stifling, but it was all about structure. It was all about learning. So I just felt like anybody who was doing one or the other maybe wasn't getting as well-rounded approach as I got. So yeah, so that was very helpful.
Very cool. Very cool. And it's interesting too. You mentioned the visual art aspect too, because you get your taught form, and then you're also. I find a lot of people I speak with, they're taught to try to forget that form.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
try to, but it's great that it's, I mean, it's like jazz in a way. It's right. You can play where the Saints go marching in, but you'll play it a different way every single time.
Yeah.
And you'll still recognize the song.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm curious, like I listen to your compositions and I feel that I feel like I see the curiosity within the meters of the songs. And it's like the song is the song, but also I like how you're exploring ideas as a composer within the songs.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
You know, so I'm curious how does that manifest for you when you're exploring an idea as a composer through music?
In terms of the structure?
Yeah, in terms of structure.
Well, I mean, I was very lucky when I first moved to New York. I studied the Schillinger method. After graduating, I studied the Schillinger method of composition with a guy named Jerome Wallman, and it was basically sort of a mathematical basis for the arts. In fact, at one time, I think Schillinger held the top position at the New School for Social Research for music composition, something to do with art and something to do with mathematics. And what attracted me to the Schillinger system was it was so naturally the way I thought. I really dove in deep, wrote a lot of pieces really, really based on the sort of isorhythmic and polymetric structures that I learned from Schillinger, and also just from African and world musics that I got exposed to at the Lincoln Center Library, because this was before Tower Records and all these kinds of places existed. Right. But then, as you're saying, at a certain point, it became intuitive enough that I just put the books away, and it just started to be the way I naturally thought. And so now, in fact, a composition student asked me this question recently. He goes, "How do you do that? Do you lay it all out?" And I go, "It's just kind of in my head now. It's just kind of like the way I hear things out, And I think also you live in New York. I actually did a record called Recess that incorporated sounds of New York into the composition. And so in a Charles Ives kind of way, you're almost confronted with the fact that you're going to hear music in a different way because of something that will happen. In fact, I remember once I was at my gym, and I was outside, and two of the people who worked there were there, and all of a sudden, all of these horns on 42nd Street went off at the same time, which to them just sounded like cacophony noise, and they looked at the look on my face, and then I just started conducting, and then they got it, and they thought, oh, okay, that's fantastic.
Like, you planned this, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, but I think it's interesting too, though. It's like you're finding the beauty in that art, finding the beauty in that work, and how to incorporate that. And what comes a great lesson learned too. What comes natural to you, and go with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much. Well, speaking of things coming naturally to you in your head, you chose this moment in this life to memorialize your life through your memoir. We're going to talk about. So why now? Why choose this moment?
Good question. We all had different experiences during the pandemic, and I'm kind of an introvert, so I was very creative during the pandemic. I did a lot of archiving. My archive is at the Performing Arts Library in New York City. It was acquired in 2010. So I did a lot of archiving, films, live performances. I wrote a video album. I wrote 2 other albums. I mean, I was really productive. And then, I don't know, maybe I can't remember what year it was, to be honest, when, this has been such a long journey, but I was talking to an she's retired now, but she was the assistant art director of the Krannert Center. And I was telling her a particularly funny story of a scandal that my first opera made in New Zealand. And she was really laughing, and she said, "You gotta write this stuff down." And people had told me to do it, and honest, it was just never anything I was interested in. I thought, I like doing the work is the work, that's it. But when Rebecca McBride said that, it just clicked. And then I had another epiphany, which is, you got to have a reason to get into something. And it dawned on me, since I had done so much work during the pandemic for my archive, it dawned on me that if you wrote a book, it might actually provide context for the archive. And then I was off to the races. It was very easy from then. And the interesting part, I like to tell people, I have a lot of friends who are writers and they struggle with it. I wrote this book in 6 months. It was really fast.
Yeah.
And I said that, but then I realized when the library acquired my archive, I started digitizing, going through press clippings. I basically have been working on that for the last 10 or 15 years. And so then when I actually honestly thought about it, I go, well, you may have written the words in 6 months, but in a way, without even intending to, you researched this for 10 years. And so I think that's why it came so quickly. And there was the benefit of the internet. So if I couldn't remember a date of a performance or a date of a record release, I could find it on the internet. So between that and all of the archiving stuff, it was just, it was a perfect storm to do it, you know.
Yeah. Is there anything in the memoir, because you're controlling the narrative, obviously the context is, providing context for the archive is wonderful, but is there anything you wanted to put in your own words, is there anything particularly you wanted to say about your own work in the memoir?
I was happy to recall the stories of how things, especially large-scale pieces, come together. But I also think I wanted to tell the truth about what it's like to be an artist who's not, you know, ridiculously famous, but who also had a good run, and the trials and tribulations of what it's like to kind of maintain a life like that. Mm-hmm. And I think, in a way, I know that a couple of writers have told me that's what they think is the success of the book, is that so many people kind of want to say, oh, look at me, I'm so great, this was great, you know, and not really dwell on the fact that, you know, you had holes in your shoes or you had these problems. And so I think that there's an honesty, you know, it's sort of like the Flaubert quote, a writer's life is the dog's life, but it's the only life. And that's kind of how that's kind of what I'm thinking the book maybe represents for me, is that, like I said, I had a great life, but it you know, it also has its limitations.
Well, and there's an ownership too that I think it's a genuineness I
Yeah.
think that comes across, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Particularly in New York, how many wonderful people do you live next to? Which is kind of why I created Inwood Art Works in a way. It's like,
Yeah.
how many wonderful, talented people are up here in New York, and Inwood, and Washington Heights, and New York for that matter, that are making it happen, and they're your neighbors.
That's right. I mean, Rauschenberg once had a quote, "Your art is just as good as mine. I just got lucky." And I do think luck has a lot to do with it, you know, and I've had a lot of luck. So,
well, kudos to you, and I hope the book goes well. Is there anything in the book, or I should say, is there anything that didn't make it into the book that wish you did?
Well, the only thing is, I don't think I would have had the stamina to spend a year on it or something. So if I have any regrets, it would be that if I'd gone a little slower, I might not have forgotten a couple of things that would have been fun to put in the book. Like, for example, my mom recently reminded me that my dad, you know, he was a state trooper, and at one point he pulled over Chuck Berry. Now, I forgot that story, and that would have been a great little thing to have in the book. No, so I'll get to tell that story in interviews and stuff. But for the most part, I think it's enough.
Yeah.
There's enough in there that I think I'm pretty happy with.
We memorialized it now, so you don't.
There we go.
So
exactly.
There you go. Is there anything about writing the process? Because you said you had all this 10 years of, you know, cataloging essentially, and you had a lot of people working with you, hopefully at Lincoln Center, to help you do some of the work. Because kind of like moving from the past into the present towards the future, is that, in that sense, is did writing the memoir allow you to big clarity looking forwards towards new pastures while, you know, reflecting? Because, as you said, an artist's life, you know, is the work.
Yeah.
Like, you're an artist. It's an action, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, did it get the wheels turning of saying, okay, I've done this. I really enjoy aspects of that. I like to revisit that, but not that.
Yeah.
And how and like ideas of kind of like, you know, putting gas back in the tank in some respects and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because the book is written kind of as a composition. It's written, there are some things that are sort of narratively in sequence, but there are a lot of things that aren't. Mm-hmm. So you could almost pick the book up and just start on one section and read that, because the book references other sections. Mm. But the book ends with, and it's all built around the work, so built around large pieces and the recordings. So the book ends with the piece One Boy's Day that was going to premiere at the Krannert Center in 2021, and then 2022. But both years it was not possible because of the pandemic. So I end it with a question mark about this piece. But this piece is about a behavioral research study from the late 40s, where 8 behavioral researchers, switching off every half hour, followed a 7-year-old boy through his entire 13-hour day. So this piece is a 13-hour installation music video piece. And so I not only end it with a question mark, but I use that section, since I'm talking about the research on the 7-year-old boy, to go, that's the only time that you get to see me talk about my childhood. The childhood is actually interwoven with the One Boy's Day piece. And I like the way that ends because it ends with a question mark. What will happen with this piece? You know, I've been working on it for over 10 years. It's I think it's a legacy piece. And so there's also the idea that will that also help the piece move forward? So it's interesting. And in fact, you know, my publisher, when she first okayed the book and stuff, and I was so pleased because her name is Lori Matheson and she's fantastic. And she said, I just have one question. And I said, yeah. And she goes, what's going on with One Boy's Day? And then I kind of thought, all right, maybe this will work. So,
a little hook out there,
Yep,
a little
exactly.
bait for somebody. But
That's
you know,
right.
it was,
You never know.
Might get another commission out of
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
How about that? Well, I understand. Speaking of the present, I understand not only the memoir you have it in writing, to looking. You have a new album just out called Language Barrier.
Yeah, that'll come out simultaneously with the book. I think the book is available for purchase on May 21st.
Okay.
And then the record will be that Friday, May, whatever the Friday is after the 21st, like May 30th or May 31, whatever. And so that's available for pre-order as well. But yeah, they'll come out kind of simultaneously. And then we'll be doing a number of events around New York. We'll be doing a conversation with Andrew Rose Gregory and Evan Gregory of the famous Gregory Brothers at the Library for the Performing Arts at Bruno Walter on June 13th. That'll be at 6 o'clock, but then at 5 o'clock there'll be a listening party for the record.
Cool.
And then 2 days later, there'll be another book event at an old haunt of mine called Rudy's. It's a bar in Hell's Kitchen.
On 9th Avenue and 44th Street.
There you go.
And the best hot dogs in the city, right?
And they're giving me a plaque.
Really?
So it's going to be
How much money did you spend there?
I wrote a lot of, I originally lived in Hell's Kitchen. I wrote a lot of pieces there. I would go there because I couldn't afford air conditioning, and they had some of the best air conditioning in the city.
Right.
So I'd go there in the morning, sit at booth number 2, wrote the talk show opera there. And so, yeah.
I was going to say, you probably spent so much money that you're the one who paid for refurbishing all the booths.
It's possible. It's possible. So, you know,
I remember that day when I walked in going, what happened?
What happened to the duct tape?
Yes, exactly. For those of you who don't know Rudy's, it is an institution.
Yeah, it is an institution. Yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, that's awesome.
Thank you.
That warms my cold, dead New Yorker heart.
Yeah, me too, actually. Yeah.
Totally. You're 40 albums deep into your career, I believe. Only 40.
Yeah.
What was it about? What did you want to say with this album? Or with the music collected for this album?
I mean, I wanted it to keep it kind of simple. I wanted it to be songs. And I just really was, I've always been all the way back to the drum machine piece, Quorum, that was used with dancers all over the world, especially the Alvin Ailey Company, but just wanted to kind of get back to doing sort of drum machine, strings, programming stuff, and just kind of make a very simple, it's a very short album. It's only 35 minutes long. It's only 10 tracks. But I think it was the thing, I think it's the record that came after the pandemic. And you don't necessarily tell that, lyrically or anything, but it's just kind of, I don't know, spring. It's coming out of the
I found it very
experience.
Uplifting, actually.
Yeah.
I felt a breezy, light.
Yeah.
Many ways.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, because the book has all the recordings, a brief description or memories or thoughts of all the recordings, but except that one, so that, I guess in that sense, that also is saying, okay, so you're starting the new chapter.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Hey, that's what it's all about.
Yep.
Keep moving forward. So we like to include a track come on, we can't tease people. Well, we can, but we want to be nice. So we like to include a track for our listening audience from the album.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So do you want to tell them what we're listening to?
I think this is called Double Timing, and it's a pretty interesting polymetric track. It opens with a kind of fun piano part, but then it very quickly kind of devolves into a very isorhythmic kind of thing where voices are kind of going against the beat and against the structure. So but I don't know, but for some reason to me it sounds like a pop tune.
We need more pop music in this world. It can't be all Taylor Swift, right?
Yeah.
All right, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy.
Bridesmaid, cover me, hit parade, partners in the air raid, dating the Medicaid. I won't say what you want me to say. I remember like it was yesterday. I don't need a visa to talk to you. I don't need your permission. Destiny, I won't even out, even if it kills me. I will miss the guiding light of hope and minor oversight. I hope you like your world. I knew before love Picasso. I knew before I knew you. I don't need you to tell me what's right. I knew before you were born. And
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Loved it.
Thank you.
You betcha. Do you have any advice for those composers and performance artists and those who put together large opera projects and pretty much like Atlas, walk with it on your shoulders and moving forward? Because you've done it all. You wrote the memoir. What advice can you give to those people out there who are trying to do it just like you?
Well, the times are very different. You know, I feel incredibly fortunate that I moved to New York in the late 70s and that there were just so many more things you could do. Real estate wasn't as expensive, you know, renting a theater space or doing just, you know, it was just a different time. And so I feel for young folks, you know, because I just think that the burdens are so much more difficult. I mean, you know, I could get a very small part-time job and afford my rent for the bulk of my existence here, and that's not the case now. So I think the great thing that the arts still provide is community, and I think if you can find like-minded people, then you can pool your resources and you can get things done. But also there's, you know, I just gave you the downside in terms of real estate and stuff, but the upside is the technology and the stuff that's available. You know, those things were so much harder to deal with when I was doing those larger scale pieces. And now there's almost no excuse not to make something great. You know, just a person with an iPhone or a laptop can do something really, really remarkable. And that to me is the trade-off. And if you can make that work, then I think you're on the way to being able to do really interesting stuff.
I like it. I agree. can be a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah,
and, but do it on your own level, right?
Yeah.
Like create your own expectations.
Yeah, and that's also kind of required. The idea of specialization. I know sometimes we go back and forth, decade to decade about that, but it's almost like not even an option now.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to understand so many aspects of technology if you want to make something.
Yeah, you'll be left behind if you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate but true.
Yeah.
But there's also collaboration out there too for those of you who need some little more help.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Well, before you part, is there anything else you'd like to let anybody else know about your work, your memoir, the new album, what's coming up?
Just
the next chapters.
The next chapters. Well, I mean, hopefully people will come to the Performing Arts Library on June 13th at 5 for the listening party and 6 for the book with the Gregory brothers, as well as Brent Reedy, who's the head of the research libraries for all of the New York Public Libraries. I think that'll be fun. And then if they're still interested, come to Rudy's at 1:00 on Saturday the 15th and continue the fun. But yeah.
Cool. And where can we send people if they're not going to they're not in New York and they can't go to the Library of Performing Arts physically or access it because they don't have a library card for a reason? Where can they find your work?
I should say the library is a free event, so
great.
They will have to, if they want to go, they should go and RSVP on the email list at LPA, but it's a free event.
Cool. But your website, people can go check out your work.
Yeah, they can find me at www.mikelrouse.com. That's one word, MIKELROUSE.com. Books available for pre-order on Amazon, and the album is available for pre-order everywhere, Apple Music, Bandcamp, all those places.
Awesome. Listeners, you have your marching orders, all right? Very much so. Well, thanks to Mikel Rouse for being here.
What a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
What a pleasure.
Absolutely. Let's do it again sometime.
I would like
and
that.
maybe can we get you up here to do something at some point?
I would love that as well.
That'd be great, right?
Yeah.
I haven't. I know Dennis Cleveland sounds great to be put up here. I mean, come on, we got to figure it out in the United Palace maybe or something. Right?
Oh, that would be wild.
That would be wild, right? 3,000 seats. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Cool. Well, once again, thanks to Mikel Rouse for joining me on this Artist Spotlight edition of Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call here upstate Manhattan. I'm your. If you have a moment right now, please rate and review this podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. Many thanks to the Church of Good Shepherd here for hosting us, and to HideSites.com for uptown promotional support. Hey, you can support On Air and all of our free to low-cost programming by going to inwoodartworks.nyc/donate or donate via Venmo at Inwood Art Works. Also, be sure to follow us on social media, keep up all that we do, which includes the upcoming Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Art Works On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council. And Inwood Art Works programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Art Works On Air.